Alright, it's been a while since I've posted a video. I think my last video was in the middle of 2019, and well, a lot of crap has happened since then, and since America is kind of burning down right now, I thought it would be appropriate to make a new video on some of the craziness that has been happening. We've seen coronavirus, World War III scares, murder hornets, Kobe Bryant's death. And now we have all the rioting and looting and everything that's going on as a result of the tragic incident with George Floyd. And that's what I want to talk about today is George Floyd and some of the responses there. I want to first talk about my basic opinion on what happened with George Floyd, and then the responses that I like to George Floyd, the responses I dislike, and then I also want to talk about some of the proposed solutions to issues like this that I've seen. So first, let me talk about my basic opinion with George Floyd. I don't think many people disagree with me here in the fact that what happened to George Floyd was incredibly tragic. It never should have happened. It was terrible police work on the part of the officers involved, and really super sad stuff. If you watch the video, it is just hard to watch. It was definitely not justified for several reasons, really, because George Floyd, he was definitely not a threat when he was being pinned down by the officer, when the knee was pressed against his neck. He was not a threat. There was 4 officers to 1 man. He was handcuffed. And then he was definitely not a threat after he passed out, but even after he passed out, the officer continued to press down on his neck, and thus it was definitely not justified and a terrible incident. Now, this has caused a lot of responses, as we have seen from people. There's a lot of people who are outraged at this because they have made it to be a racial issue. Now, we don't know for a fact, I'd like to point out, that this was driven by racism. We don't know for a fact that his actions were driven by racism. I just like to point that out. But since everybody is treating it like it is a racist issue, for the sake of the point I'm going to make in this argument, I'm going to treat it as if it was a racial issue. So let's get to some of the reactions that I've seen from this. The first reaction I saw, and this is kind of actually what made me aware of the incident, was I saw sports figures. They were posting this picture that says, "This is why," and it has a picture of the cop and George Floyd and then Colin Kaepernick. So my initial reaction is, can we please just make like a racist issue not about Colin Kaepernick for once in our lives? Can Colin Kaepernick just not be part of this? He's just everywhere. I'll just briefly share my opinions with the whole Colin Kaepernick ordeal. Actually, Drew Brees kind of put out a statement where recently that he did not support kneeling down for the flag, and he thought it was disrespectful. And this caused a lot of outrage in the sports community. I saw George Hill, an NBA player, saying that he had lost all respect for Drew Brees because of this statement. So first of all, Drew Brees is allowed to have his opinion, and I don't think that people should be hating on people for their opinions. Second of all, he's right. I agree with him in the fact that kneeling down for the flag, no matter the purpose, is just disrespectful. It just really is. There's people who died for the flag and for what it stands for. And when you kneel down for the flag, you're protesting America as a whole. You're saying this country as a whole is not good, because that's what the flag stands for. So even if your opinion, or even if in your mind you're protesting something that is a good cause, kneeling down for the flag or disrespecting the flag, burning the flag in any way, is just not appropriate under any circumstance. So that's my opinion there, just because it stands for the nation as a whole. The other thing that I don't like, Instagram posts like this, is because it conflates the issue to be something bigger than what it actually is. It makes it seem like all cops are bad cops, and this is kind of a message that I really dislike, and something that I think is really hurtful for our nation. This idea that somehow all cops are racist, all cops are bad cops like this one cop was. I think it's just a really sad message, because the vast majority of cops out there are just, trying to do their job effectively. They're trying to protect the citizens of the U.S. They're trying to serve their country, and they're just trying to make a living, really. They're just trying to have a job so, they can make it from day to day, and then, because of one rotten apple's actions, then they get all sorts of hate. And I don't think that's an appropriate, message to promote at all. Kevin Hart also posted on Instagram kind of about the whole Colin Kaepernick ordeal where he said the media needs to start promoting the right message. He says, with Colin Kaepernick, the media made it about disrespecting the flag when in reality it was about protesting racial injustice. First of all, I don't think this is true, Kevin Hart. The media is definitely mostly on your side with things like this. Second of all, they made it about disrespecting the flag a little bit because that's what you're doing when you kneel down for the flag. You're disrespecting it, even if your cause you feel like is just. And he also compared it to the riots that are happening right now. And he says the media is making this about all the rioting and looting and how that's not okay, but they're forgetting the message as to why the rioting and looting is occurring. And to me, it's almost, it's kind of, Kevin Hart's idea is kind of shared with some people, I think, who are kind of justifying the rioting and looting because they say the cause is just. But again, this is kind of the same sort of Colin Kaepernick ideal. Even if you think your cause is just, that does not justify unjust actions in response, like burning down Target, burning down AutoZone, hitting innocent civilians, beating up innocent civilians, destroying, private property, etc. These are just actions that are not justified by the cause that you are doing it for, or you claim you're doing it for. So that is why the media focuses on those things, because they're just, they're not justified in any way. They're morally wrong. And nobody is forgetting, why they're occurring. Nobody is doubting why the riots and lootings are happening. They know it's in response to George Floyd. They knew Colin Kaepernick was kneeling because of, racial, protesting racial injustice. People haven't forgot about that. It's not like the media forgot. It's just people already know. And these actions are still not justified. You're never justified in assaulting an innocent civilian. You're never justified in destroying private property and destroying a privately owned business and just hurting people in these ways. Hurting a business, hurting an individual, hurting others in a hateful way in no way helps the issue at hand. It in no way helps, racism in any way. Furthermore, this rioting and looting is also disregarding black lives as well. For example, this was a police captain, David Dorn, a black man who was shot and killed by looters and rioters, which is unfortunate. And I know George Floyd's life definitely mattered, but this man's life mattered as well. And so, these rioting and lootings, they're not helping the Black Lives Matter movement at all. So the rioting and looting is just crazy and just unjustified in any way. And if you're trying to justify the rioting and looting, I'm sorry, but you're just crazy in the head, to put it mildly, because it is just so, I saw this video where an innocent man was just crying because his car had been smashed in, all the windows, etc., by rioters and looters. I saw this man who was laying on the ground being beat up by a mob because he was just trying to defend his privately owned small business from rioters and looters. I mean, and if you think that is okay because of the cause, then that's just not right. There's a popular saying that says that the ends don't always justify the means. Well, I don't think the cause always justifies the means either, for sure. There's also this interesting idea that I've seen where people are trying to justify this rioting and looting. For example, this is a Twitter post by Peyton Dastrup. He says, when our founding fathers and people in the 1700s were oppressed by the British taxes, what did they do? They rioted, dumped tea in the harbor, and forged a war that won them their freedom. Now when people riot for these same freedoms hundreds of years later, it's wrong. Shake my head. #BLM. Okay, so a couple things here. First of all, throwing tea in the harbor is a lot different from assaulting innocent civilians and burning down privately owned businesses. Okay, that tea was owned by the government, and they were protesting a governmental law which was unjust. In this case, there is no law made by the government that grants white people more rights than black people. There is no law in our current system that people are protesting because of this racial injustice. And then the people that did get killed by the Americans were mostly British soldiers, because there was an actual war going on. They weren't just random innocent civilians that Americans were were killing just for the heck of it because they were angry. So there's a lot of differences here. You can't justify this rioting and looting because America fought for their freedom in the 1700s. You can't. So yeah, that's my stance on that. The rioting and looting that's happening and that reaction there. As far as rioting and looting goes, I think that Dan Crenshaw kind of sums up my kind of thoughts here. He says, raw emotion is a natural result of injustice. We all feel it after George Floyd's death, but we are still accountable for our actions. No amount of righteous anger can justify violent and destructive action. We must do better. Leaders must end the riots now. And I agree with this. Just because we are angry or we're emotionally charged does not justify morally wrong actions for any cause, really. So that's the first reaction that I dislike, is the rioting and looting. Definitely inappropriate. Now, another reaction that I've seen is people claiming that this was a result of systematic racism. So this is a common reaction I've seen on social media. We're saying that George Floyd's death is not an isolated incident. It has happened to multiple other black individuals, and thus this is something that is inherent in our system. Oh, here's a post by Chloe Grace Moretz, a celebrity that kind of shows what I'm talking about, this claim that there's a systemic racism. She says, these are the facts. We must fight white supremacy. The system isn't broken. The system was built on it. Built in all caps. Built on it. This is just a claim that is not supported by any facts or data at all. Data and this idea that our system was built on evil principles, that it was built on systemic racism. This idea is what socialists, they love, because it means that if our system was founded on evil principles, then we should overturn the system completely to something new, and that's what socialists want. They want a complete overturn to socialism, which is drastically different than what our nation's ideals are. So, I mean, let's just look at a couple examples of what the principles our nation was founded on. How about life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, the idea that all men are created equal. Those are the principles our nation was founded on. These are not evil principles. And so this idea that we are founded on some sort of evil principles, this evil systemic racism is incredibly dangerous, and it's what socialists like, so they can, get an overturning of society. So let's get to the facts and data that show that we are not systemically racist. Because certainly if we were systemically racist, the stats would show it. We'd be seeing a lot more of George Floyd. We wouldn't see just this one isolated incident with George Floyd. I know people bring up George Floyd's not an isolated incident. This has happened on multiple occasions where black people have been shot by cops. And this is true. But if we look at the statistics, we can see that these incidents aren't happening to black people at a higher rate than they are happening to white people at all. The reason it seems like they're happening to black people more is because whenever a cop shoots a black person, the media conflates it to be this huge, giant issue. This is, I think, a good illustration of what happens. And this was posted by my good friend over at Concrete Conspiracy. So that's why it seems to people why that black people are getting killed by white cops at a higher rate than anything else, but this is not true. So let's look at some of the stats here. We can look at a study done by the University of Maryland and the University of Michigan and professors done there. And here's a quote from that study. The vast majority, between 90% and 95% of civilians shot by officers were actively attacking police or other citizens when they were shot. So the vast majority of times when citizens are shot by police, the police are justified. They are protecting themselves, or they are protecting others when they do so. The vast majority of the time. They aren't just shooting random black civilians just for the heck of it because they're racist all the time, okay? So this is from that same study kind of headed by the professor, Joseph Cesaro at Michigan State. Okay, so he says there are so many examples of people saying that when black citizens are shot by police, it's white officers shooting them. But in fact, our findings show no support that black citizens are more likely to be shot by white officers. So their studies found that like white officers aren't shooting black people at a higher rate than any like a black officer, for instance. So there's no data support racism in our cop system there. Um, and these findings were based on a study that was published by the PNAS, the Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences, and it was based on a database that Cesaro and his team created that cataloged each police shooting from 2015. The team was also led by co-author David Johnson from the University of Maryland. They contacted every police department that had a fatal police shooting to get the race, sex, and years of experience for every officer involved in each incident. And the team also leveraged data from police shooting databases. So another statistics, this is NPR. The race of a police officer did not predict the race of a citizen shot. In other words, black officers were just as likely to shoot black citizens as white officers were. This was posted by NPR. From that same study from the University of Michigan and the University of Maryland, they found that 50% of all fatal police shootings were white people, 27% were black, and 19% were Hispanic. Well, people say, well, of course this is the case because there are more white people here in America. However, black people have encounters with the cops more often than white Americans. In fact, black Americans make up 25% of fatal police encounters, even though they commit 10 times the amount of gun violence as white and Hispanics combined, and that is according to the Department of Justice. So even though they commit more gun violence and have more encounters with the police, they only make up 25% of fatal police encounters. So no evidence for racism there. And then here's another one by the Manhattan Institute. A police officer is 18.5 times more likely to be killed by a black male than an unarmed black male is to be killed by a cop. So you, as a cop, are actually more likely to be killed by a black male than an unarmed black male is to be killed by a cop. Here's another one posted on Twitter by Leondis Johnson, who cites his statistics: the 2017 FBI UCR, the 2018 FBI UCR, the 2017 police shootings from the Washington Post, the 2018 police shootings from the Washington Post. And he says, for every 10,000 black people arrested for violent crime, 3 are killed. For every 10,000 white people arrested for violent crime, 4 are killed. I'm going to keep tweeting this until someone can explain to me how it's possible if there is truly pervasive racial bias in policing. So again, we can see that there's no data to show that cops are killing blacks at a higher rate than whites, that cops are inherently racist, and that there's some systemic racism here in our society that is present in the way that our law enforcement works. So that claim is just an emotionally charged claim, and it's not backed up by any facts or data at all. And so that deals with the white privilege argument, too, that I'd like to discuss here. I saw this post by Chloe Grace Mortez here. That kind of outlines the whole white privilege idea. On one side, you can see it has the things that we can do, the things that people can do as white people, and on the other hand, it has all the black people that have been killed by cops. And this is, I guess, to show white privilege, but some of the things on here are pretty interesting. She says, I can walk alone. I can plan a party. I can go to Walmart. I can sleep. I can go to church. I can run. All these things that apparently that people can do because they're white. Apparently you can sleep as a white person because you're privileged, but a black person cannot. And you can go to Walmart because you're privileged as a white person, and black people cannot. I think this whole idea is really sad because, as we can see, there's no statistics to show that black people are being killed at a higher rate than white people by cops, or are in any sort of more danger than white people. So I think it's kind of sad that we're playing into this idea that black people can't even shop at Walmart because they're in so much danger. But white people can. I think this idea is really quite sad. I don't feel like that black people should be living in that fear. I think the reason that black people do live in that fear is because media has conflated issues, And I think it's incredibly sad that that's the case. I think black people should enjoy the freedoms of America without fear, and they can, because as we can see, there's no systemic racism, there's no inherent racism in our cops, and they should be able to live without that fear. So I think that's incredibly sad, and I think it's this playing into the white privilege idea. It robs people of their individuality, really. When you play into this idea that there's a certain race or group that is privileged, and now I'm part of a disadvantaged group, and because of that, the privileged group should help me out to get me to their level, or somebody else should make some sort of change that makes up for this disadvantage that I believe I have. When you play into this idea, it robs you of your individuality. It doesn't make you want to be accountable for your own choices. It doesn't make you want to be a better person or to work harder to try and be successful, because you can. As we can see, there's many black people who are incredibly successful who came from like hard circumstances. We can look at Ben Carson, LeBron James, even a rapper like Quavo, or an actor like Kevin Hart. People who are black, who, because of the freedoms that are allowed to them by America, because the system wasn't systematically racist against them, they're able to be, multi-millionaires. People who are incredibly successful because they were able to have that individuality mindset. They didn't play into this victimization where they expected other people to help them because they were disadvantaged. They were accountable for their actions, and they were able to work hard. And they were able to be an individual, and because of that, they were successful. And so this white privilege idea robs people of that individuality, and can be dangerous in that way. Makes people less successful. So those are some of the reactions that I disagree with the rioting and protesting. Obviously, people claiming white privilege or systemic racism. Those are the ideas that I do not, that I dislike, that I think people are misfounded when they have those. So now for some reactions that I think are good, reactions that I like. First up, we have this post by Kristen Bell. Now, Kristen Bell is kind of cute, and from her posts, it seems like she has some actually pretty reasonable opinions. So, new celebrity crush, I'm thinking maybe. Anyway, here's her post. She says, I want to see more posts like this. This image is important. Black men protecting one white cop who was separated from his other officers. These images exist of people who do not want more violence but want to protest because now is the time for change and the violence must stop. I really like this post because it shows kind of, the unity that we should be striving for here today. Black people and cops coming together, showing that, in an American society, we have the freedom to support each other, and we should. And we don't need to play into this idea that all cops are bad and that all cops are trying to kill us black people. As you can see, these black people are protecting the cop. Now, there's some comments on this post that I think are annoying. For example, this comment that says, "Kristen, I know you mean well, but this is a bad take. Why should these people have to come together with the people who are actively murdering them for their skin color? I'm human first clearly is not working mentality as people still disregard others' lives." Okay, so this comment is a bunch of bullcrap, because why on earth would you say, why should these people have to come together with the people who are actively murdering them for their skin color? First of all, as we have seen, cops aren't actively murdering people for their skin color, just not supported by any facts. Second of all, why would you be against the idea of people coming together? I don't get. Like, why should these people have to come together? Because that's what we want in America. We want unity. That's why people should want to come together. And I don't like how she used the word have. Why should these people have to come together? Nobody's forcing those black people to protect that cop. They're choosing out of their own free will, because that's what you can do in American society, is make choices because you have freedom. And you should choose to support others. You should choose to love. You should choose to protect those from violence. And so this comment is a bunch of bogus. Here's another post by Kristen Bell that I like. She posted this video of this sheriff who was addressing the protesters and saying like, "Hey, I agree with you. Police brutality is bad. I'm gonna join this protest with you guys." And this police chief joined the protest with the protesters, and this is another great example of unity, people coming together against a common cause. Police brutality is bad, and so. And this cop agreed with that, and so he joined this protest, and this is just another great example of unity that I love. That's what we should be striving for here in America, and people should be understand that. There's a lot of cops that are like this police captain who doesn't like police brutality. In fact, the majority of cops do not, the vast majority of cops do not like police brutality, and so people, unifying with those cops to try to, eradicate the bad apples as best they can, I think is just a great message. Yeah. So that's what I do like. I also support peaceful protests. We've seen a lot of peaceful protests, and I think that's good. We should definitely. Racism is still present in American society for sure. Is it inherent in the system? No. Are our cops, the majority of our cops, racist? No. In fact, the vast majority are not. And there's no support to show that the cops are just killing black people for the heck of it because they're racists. There's no proof to show that. But I do think that there still are racist individuals in American society. In fact, I think a lot of people have racial bias to some degree. And I think that we should bring awareness to that issue and try to eradicate racism the best as we can, even in ourselves. Some, people themselves might be more racist than they care to admit, even if they're not trying to be. And so I think we, protests like this, trying to bring awareness to racial issues like this, good social media posts like we saw, like that just show unity. I think those are incredibly good. Peaceful protests that promote that narrative, unity, and trying to fight, racial injustice and racism. I think that's really good as long as if they're peaceful and well founded. So I do support peaceful protests like that. Good social media posts like I just showed you by Kristen Bell. I do like that a lot. Now I'd like to get to some of the proposed solutions that we're seeing from some people. Now, this proposed solution or something of that nature I'd like to show is by Kyrie Irving. Now, what he's suggesting here is pretty whack, and I'm just gonna, it's kind of a longer post, but I'm just gonna read it really quickly because it's got a lot. All right. I am calling on all of my people of color, leaders of change, and all those who are aware of what has happened, and are ready for solutions. They can't stop us when we are together and truly understand our power as a collective. Our native indigenous black spirits, our native indigenous black minds, our native indigenous black bodies deserve to be treated with more respect, understanding, and love. Yes, black people should definitely be treated with respect, understanding, and love. Know that our bloodlines come from royalty. We are the true royalty. We are the original king and queens of this spiritual and physical world. They hide all of our history for a reason. I don't think any of the government's trying to hide your history or anyone's trying to hide your history, really. I think you can look that up on the internet just fine. We're captured and enslaved against our will for the benefit of their oppressive and racist system that has been in place and is still in place presently. Again, the system is not racist. There's nothing to show that it is. They took everything we have created culturally, call it their own, and then turn it into something it was never meant to be or mean. I don't know what you're talking about. I am so sick of this idea of letting this thing balance out and talk it out, bull crap. And as a native of many indigenous lands of our world, that is part of my purpose of being here. It is to help change this whole global agenda that has killed my family members and plagued my community for so freaking long. Our parents and their parents' parents have fought every year of their lives to keep the truth about this world alive. The agenda, free our people, because we know all this talking and protesting will get us maybe a few law changes and conversations, but at this point it's bigger than that. So if protesting isn't enough, like, what are you supposed to do? And he's about to tell you what they're going to do, which is where it's whack. This talking and protesting will get us a few law changes and conversations, but at this point it's bigger than that. It's time to take all our native indigenous black culture, businesses, ideas to a new place as a collective and protest it just like our other cultures have done. Build our own. It's clear white supremacy and corporations use us native, indigenous, black folk when it is beneficial for their agenda and pockets. So be aware of the truth in plain sight. Family, how are we going to break these generational curses that have been put on us purposefully to kill us and our black families off, taking our land and culture back? Our ancestors are watching and protecting us now more than ever. This is our future kids. We are the generation that will change this. Okay, so that post is just very whack on so many levels, but basically his proposed solution is we have to take our things elsewhere. I don't know exactly what you're proposing, as in you want to segregate yourselves purposefully in some place in America or someplace outside of America as a black culture, which I think is not good. Governmental enforced segregation back in the day was a terrible idea, and I think willing segregation, as Kyrie Irving looks like he's proposing, is also a terrible plan. We need to come together in a time like this, not separate ourselves from others in any way, shape, or form. That's just a terrible post, Kyrie Irving. I don't even know what you're talking about. Okay, so this is a post. The next thing up is a post by Joshua Rush. Here's what you can do right now from your phone without having to move an inch. Donate. Your parents probably can. If they can't or won't donate, there's a YouTube video you can watch with ads on. All ad revenue will be sent to many of the local bail funds. So it looks like they want to donate to bail people out of jail, which if they... seems interesting because sometimes people need to be in jail. We can't just bail out every black person out of jail just because they're black. So that's also an interesting idea. And then this idea is also kind of crazy. He says, radicalize a friend. Don't lie to yourself. Sometimes the long, angry messages back and forth give you a rush. Now's the time to radicalize everyone you know, your family, your friends, your former teachers. Okay, so this is just a terrible plan. You should not radicalize anybody, your neighbors, nor anyone else. You should view them as a reasonable person that has reasonable things to believe. And obviously having a discussion with them about differing opinions is good, but it should be angry. Usually angry discussions are not productive, as he suggests here. Have a long, angry discussion. No, I mean... you can think about, like, the Nazi Party, for example. What did they do? They made people radicalize the Jews, and because of this hatred and and because people radicalized some of their neighbors who were Jews or different neighbors who they grew up together, but now they fed into this idea that we need to radicalize all these people because they have just crazy plans, crazy opinions, and because they're not my opinion, they must be radical. And then it just created something that was super dangerous where, people were turning the Jews into the police, their neighbors and friends, turning them into the police where they were sent to concentration camps and killed. And so this whole radicalize a friend idea, terrible. Yeah. And then he has another suggestion here with his equally as whack. Sign a petition to tell the Minneapolis City Council to defund their police department. Why are we defunding? Because that money is going to directly fund police brutality. And it can be going towards housing, EDU, healthcare, parks, and so much more. Already signed? Search for a local petition asking the same for your city. Google search bar as a really great tool. Can't find one, set one up. Okay, so this is also just a bunch of bullshit. And when I saw this post originally, I saw this suggestion right here, and I thought, well, that's the stupidest, petition ever. Nobody's going to sign that. Why would you want to defund a police department as a whole? Yeah, I mean, Minneapolis had that one guy who was pretty stupid, but why would you want to defund it as a whole? I mean, the police, they're the ones who enforce the law. They're the ones, that if you're about to get mugged, if you're getting mugged, you call them and you say, get my money back or help me. If you're a woman and you're about to be sexually assaulted, you call the police to help rectify that issue. So, I mean, defunding the police... that's just going to make the crime rate grow up. And so I thought this was the stupidest idea, and I said, there's no way that's going to go anywhere. But lo and behold, we are hearing now that the Minneapolis City Council has indeed voted to defund their police department, like absolute psychotics. Like what? All this does is make the crime rate go up. There's nobody to enforce the law. There's nobody to protect you when you're in danger. Like you've got the feminists out there screaming that, there's this rape culture. How are we supposed to solve rape culture if there's no police there to save you when you're about to get raped? It's just chaos. All this does is make the crime rate go up, and black people will get killed at a higher rate. Innocent civilians will get killed at a higher rate. White people will get killed at a higher rate because the crime rate's just going to go up because there's no police department to stop it. I mean, the people who have this idea, what are they, like the Joker from The Dark Knight? You know, when he says, "I'm an agent of chaos"? That's what these people are. Agents of chaos, it seems. Like they want anarchy or something. They want to throw us back to the Wild West. The Wild West wasn't a safe time for anybody, let me tell you. People would just get shot on the streets, etc. That's what's going to happen if you don't have somebody there to enforce the law and keep the peace. It's just straight idiocy, this idea. So now for some proposed solutions that I like. In my opinion, this whole police brutality idea, there are definitely some bad apples of cops who act out of turn, who act inappropriately, and who do incredibly unjust things, as we've seen with George Floyd. However, the vast majority of cops are not like this. The vast majority of cops do their job extremely well. So, my proposed solution is we could make some changes in the way that our police departments currently train their officers, in the way that they handle what their officers do. If an officer commits an offense or something, I think that should definitely be taken more seriously, and I think that officers should be removed for making mistakes to a reasonable degree before they can make giant mistakes. So if somebody's being telling of a bad apple, they should be removed before they can do something that is very bad. So I'd like to see some reform in the way that our police are trained, and some measures to be taken where we can eliminate the bad apples before they do something very drastic. But I don't think that police departments need to be defunded, or I don't think that some drastic changes need to be made. We just need to take some reasonable approaches to try to eliminate bad apples before they do something incredibly atrocious. That's what we need. And as far as like a solution for racism as a whole, I do not think that the system is racist. So we do not need to pass any sort of law that changes the system in any way. We do not need some drastic overturn of society, because there's just no proof to show that our system is systemically racist at all. So I think we should be promoting good messages to try to get people to change their racial bias that they may have, as a whole, to try to get individuals who may be racist in our nation to change. And I think we can do that through good movies, good social media posts, just good conversation online, on online formats with each other and our friends. Good conversation to bring awareness to this racial issue and try to eliminate it really once and for all. I really like this post by Chris Pratt. You should go check it out if you can, on Instagram, where he reposts something by Real John Gray. I think black pastor who's talking about the whole Black Lives Matter movement, and really the way that we're gonna solve it is through loving each other and through loving God, and having the love of God for others around us. And I think really that's the solution we need to try to help more people kind of see others as God sees them, through without any bias or at all. We need to be promoting messages like this pastor says here, to try to convince people to just love each other and love each other for their souls, not the color of their skin. And so I think that's the main solution we need, is to just bring a conversation to that. We don't need no drastic overturning a society, some big change in a system that is not systemically racist, but we should be spreading messages of love, for sure. So those are kind of my thoughts on everything that's been going on. If you agree with what I'm saying, if you think the message that I'm saying is valuable in any way, please share it. And adios.